Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Gabrielle Vito and you are at MS Connect. I'm a longtime MS Society volunteer since my own diagnosis way back in 1996. I'm coming to you today from the beautiful city of Parksville on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. And I'm so pleased to welcome you to this, our final session of this special spring edition of MS Connect. As someone who lives with MS, I've really enjoyed connecting and listening to healthcare professionals, researchers from across the country for the past couple of days. It's been a great opportunity, and I'm grateful to be a part of this nationwide community of support, especially as we kick off MS Awareness Month, which of course starts on May 1st. I'm also looking forward to the fall edition of MS Connect, which will take place in November with 5 more days of great content. Plus, the popular vendor fair will be back in the fall, and we'll have the poster sessions with young researchers. Now, this afternoon and this evening, we'll be discussing a series of issues with a panel of experts. All of today's session is dedicated to improving wellness for people living with MS. Our 3 panelists have a wealth of knowledge and expertise in the areas of nutrition, physical activity, and mental health. I know we've all been trying to do our best in these days, but COVID-19 has definitely created a wide range of new challenges in all of these areas. So I'm looking forward to learning some new ideas and strategies. Now I need to share a few housekeeping details, questions. This session is all about you and your questions for our panelists, so please type them into the question box at any time throughout the session, and I'll be directing the questions through the session. We invite you to join the online conversation and share your favorite moments from today's session or any of the sessions that you've been at over the last couple of days. If you tweet, please use the hashtag MSConnect. We also invite you to make your voice heard and respond to our daily poll on the MS Society Twitter page. That's at MS Society Canada. Now, also for your information, this session is being recorded and will be shared at a later date at msconnect.ca. So now it's time to get on to today's panelists for today's session. To start things off, I'm going to ask each panelist to briefly introduce themselves and say a few words about yourself, your area of expertise, your connection to MS, and why you got involved with the MS community. So I'm going to start off, please, with Margot. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I'm a physiotherapist working with Toronto Rehab, which is part of the University Health Network in Toronto. And I have focused my career on working with people living with neurological conditions. And really, while providing care in people's homes, I had the privilege of seeing people's day-to-day lives and also better understanding the challenges of transitioning to a new way of life after being diagnosed with a neurological condition or injury. And one thing that was clear to me was that my clients who had balance mobility challenges, they had a much harder time staying active, and that they couldn't support their health and wellness enough because they weren't moving enough. And let's face it, most Canadians can't afford long-term physiotherapy. So I knew that I wanted to be a part of something bigger that helps build community capacity for physical activity. So when the chance arose for me to lead the Together in Exercise and Movement program, Together in Movement and Exercise, I should know my own program's name, but we call it the TIME program. So when the chance arose to lead that, I jumped at it because it's a low-cost exercise and wellness program that supports people with chronic mobility impairments to stay active in their local community centers. And so this is how I became involved with the MS Society of Canada, because they've always been such good advocates of the classic TIME program, and they also were our incredible partners to help us develop and expand into our virtual program. So for any of you who participated in the exercise program yesterday morning, that's our Time at Home program that we developed in partnership with MS Society of Canada. And, it was with the incredible feedback of their staff and volunteers and members that we created the program we have today. So I'm just so grateful to be invited here and to have such wonderful partners with the MS Society of Canada.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Margot, for being here. I'm going to go across the country now, or the middle part of the country. And next, I'm going to ask Tiffany. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Gabrielle. So I'm a registered dietitian. I've been working in the Calgary MS clinic for almost 10 years now. We have a very strong interdisciplinary team where I work with a common goal of wellness. I love doing nutritional counseling for people living with MS. I have also had the opportunity to speak at the MS Connect conferences in Edmonton a couple of years ago, as well as attend the Calgary one through the Alberta chapter. Here in Calgary, I work at a hospital called the South Health Campus, and I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to offer culinary nutrition programs out of our wellness kitchen. So one thing that I'm really passionate about is how can we apply the theory to practical knowledge? So I always hope to impart that on people is how can you take good nutrition messages and take it home to your kitchen and actually apply it to your day-to-day living.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, Tiffany. So coming over to the West Coast now, I'm going to finally, last but not least, ask Michelle. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So my name is Michelle Srdanovic, and I'm a registered clinical counselor working here in private practice in New Westminster in British Columbia. So I have a few different hats that kind of brought me to the MS Society. One of the interests that I have just in terms of healthcare is I'm also part-time faculty here at BCIT, which is a healthcare institute on the coast, and I teach in health sciences. And so I've actually been teaching for a number of years alongside counseling into healthcare and teaching technicians and nurses and around bedside manner when working with patients who have chronic illness. And so with that kind of background, I can't say that I had a direct interest in MS in particular until my own diagnosis in 2013. And so that was when I had a more specific intersection with the MS Society, and I attended their very helpful workshop for newly diagnosed folks here in Burnaby in British Columbia way back then. And there was a lot of great information, and there was a little bit less information at that particular workshop on the emotional impact of being diagnosed. So I sort of took that opportunity to introduce myself to the MS Society, and they've graciously hosted me a couple of times a year to speak to the emotional impact of MS from the two hats that I wear, both from being a therapist or a counselor and also a person who's living with MS. And so while I don't work specifically with clients in my own practice that have chronic illness, I work primarily with anxiety and trauma. I certainly find it all kind of intersects in a helpful way. So for this, I'm really grateful to continue to be connected to the MS Society, and it's very meaningful for me to be able to contribute.
Fabulous. Thank you all for being here. So as a reminder to everybody tuning in today, any questions you'd like to ask can be typed into the question box on your screen at any time during today's session. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you can also write those questions into the question box, and the tech team will see them and will be able to help you. So to get us started, I'm going to start us off with asking about barriers. For each of you, I'm going to ask, what is the number one barrier people with MS experience when it comes to exercise, nutrition, or mental health? And what would you suggest to help someone overcome or reduce this barrier? Let's go back to Toronto and start again with Margot.
Great. So I would say that fatigue is a very big barrier, especially in finding the motivation or energy to exercise or even be physically active in like our leisure time, which is so important. So in terms of overcoming it, good sleep habits, healthy eating, stress management, and of course, physical activity, they all help to combat fatigue. But additionally, something that's so helpful is learning energy conservation strategies. And this approach is really centered around the idea that we recognize that energy is limited. So you learn strategies to be very intentional with how you use your energy. And there are several main principles that are around pacing, planning, prioritizing, efficiency with the task, efficiency with movement. And of course, you can talk to many people on your healthcare team about energy conservation, but in particular, I know our OTs and PTs at Toronto Rehab love talking about this. But another piece of it is having your support system, like they can help you also with energy conservation, because we can figure out what other people can take off our plate and we can practice asking for the help. So you can borrow the energy of others when you have more to do in a day than you have the energy to budget for it. And this is a skill that's practiced and learned. It's not easy at first, but it can be very helpful in planning for a full and meaningful day or week.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Margot. I'm going to go next to Tiffany. Same question. Barriers.
So it's really hard for me to say only one thing. I have seen two major barriers that people living with MS experience in the area of nutrition. The first, just to echo Margot, is fatigue. So we all know how real fatigue is when living with MS. To eat well when fatigued, I could talk an hour alone about this, but my brief version is to do some meal planning. It sounds very daunting and it can be overwhelming if you're not currently doing any meal planning, but a little bit of meal planning goes a long way to help you pace yourself and conserve energy. So even just start with 2 suppers a week. One thing that I like to do is I keep a list taped inside my cupboard of meals that I can quickly prepare. And so think about meals that you enjoy, meals that you can pace yourself through. Keep your pantry stocked with quick and easy proteins such as canned fish and dried lentils. Pace yourself through that preparation. Can you do some tasks in the morning, some after lunch, and then just assemble it at supper time? Consider batch cooking and freezing the extras. Plan out your grocery list according to your meal plan. So if you have a bit of a plan, you can think, okay, what do I need at the grocery store? Ideally, you're only making 1 trip a week to the grocery store because you don't want to expend more time and energy than you have to. The other thing with COVID is there's so many grocery delivery options available now that never used to be. So I strongly encourage people to use those services if you're not already. Online grocery shopping where all you have to do is drive and they can load your trunk with it, or even actually getting the delivery too. So, or maybe even considering doing that just the once a month big shop and then smaller shops in between. So anyway, I could say a lot about fatigue, but I do want to just touch on one other major barrier that I see, and that would be diet confusion. So there are many diets proposed for people living with MS, and I want you to think that you are an individual, you are unique. Just because one eating pattern works for someone doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. So you have to think about what works best for yourself in your current circumstances. If a diet is proposing eliminating whole food groups that you typically eat and you feel well eating, this is something you should question. The other thing is diet is only one component of wellness, as we're all speaking about today here. And so I don't want you to put too much pressure on yourself to eat perfect. I like the 80-20 rule. So aim to eat well as best as you can 80% of the time, and that 20% isn't going to have a huge impact on your health. If there was one diet that I would recommend, it would be the Mediterranean. This pattern of eating is a well-balanced diet that promotes good health, and it also has anti-inflammatory properties.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Great information. And Michelle, barriers that you see in mental health issues.
Great. So just to piggyback on actually what's already been said, but with maybe a more mental health kind of lens, given that for those of us that struggle with fatigue, that there are certainly some obstacles to probably maintaining a certain level of independence. One of the biggest barriers that I see when I'm working with clients in this way, or just have experienced in my own life, is just around sorting out this sort of psychological challenge of where am I able to maintain my independence and where do I need to ask for help. And for some folks, and I certainly know this from my teaching as well, one of the units that I teach on actually is about assertion in particular. And a lot of folks would commonly identify that that's one of the communication skills that's the biggest challenge in their lives. And so there's a lot of superheroes living with MS that are used to living quite independently and have a really difficult time letting, first of all, people know how they're actually feeling, because of course MS is invisible for a lot of folks in different ways, and fatigue is in particular, and also giving themselves permission to do that, to let things go, and to delegate or to ask for help. And so I would say that's one of the biggest sort of psychological barriers that people would need to work through.
Great information. Thank you all so much. So our next question comes to us from Montreal, and it is directed to Margot about exercise. How much exercise is too much? In other words, is it okay to do daily, or do you need to rest in between?
Yeah, thank you. So that's a great question, and I think what I will generally advise is this is going to be different for every individual, because it depends on what your current level of activity is and what your current fitness is. So the best advice is, when you're getting started, is to probably consult a health professional, be it a physiotherapist or a kinesiologist or another exercise professional who has knowledge of MS, to be able to guide you in what the right types and amounts of exercise would be for you. But as a general rule, and this is based off of the Canadian Physical Activity Guidelines for adults with MS, they generally recommend that when you need to be doing a mix of aerobic or cardiovascular exercise along with strength training of major muscle groups. And on days when you're really doing a strength training workout and you're working your muscles quite hard, you do want to rest a day in between. But with the more of the cardio and getting your heart rate up, again, depending on what your current activity level is, it would be safe to do that every day. I hope that helps a little bit answer your question.
Absolutely. Great information. Thank you so much. Our next question comes to us from Toronto. Now, this is a very topical and timely question. This person is asking, I'm sure that I should speak to my doctor for specifics about my personal health. So that's a good acknowledgement off the top. But is there any reports on people with MS receiving COVID vaccinations? So again, vaccinations are topical, very much on everyone's mind right now. I will share anecdotally that I received my first vaccination just 2 days ago. I am not a study, I am not a medical professional, but my own personal experience is so far I have far fewer side effects than I have normally from the DMT I'm on. So there's my 2 little bits. Vaccinations in our COVID world today, has it come up in either, for any of you, in your areas of expertise and the clients that you see and hear about with MS? We'll start again with Margot.
Yes. So again, at the end of the day, it's best to speak to your primary care provider, your doctor or nurse practitioner, about any specific concerns you have. But generally speaking, it seems to be encouraged, like the government seems to be encouraging people with MS to get vaccinated. And there's actually a lot of resources online through the government that you can look up specifically your diagnosis and guidance around vaccination. So that's where I'd recommend going.
Excellent. Tiffany, have you had any experience with clients and vaccinations so far?
I can't say that I have, but I would echo what Margot just said.
Yourself?
I've had some indirect some indirect encounters with clients who live with chronic health issues, some of whom have MS and others who don't, who are sorting out their own decision around the vaccine. And certainly, I think one of the things I could generally say is that anecdotally, what I have noticed in a clinical setting is that when researched, the decision to proceed with a vaccine has sort of decreased folks who are struggling with a lot of anxiety alongside their health issues right now in COVID. And one of the things that's been really positive around mental health is just the idea of feeling safer in community, even with a first vaccine. And so for some people that have been really fearful or anxious about leaving their home, they've spoken a little bit around feeling like they have more mobility and less fear as they sort of look forward to the possibility of even receiving a second vaccination. So that would be the link in I'd make with mental health.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. So to close off on vaccinations, the other thing I would also suggest is I know the MS Society previously has a webcast that was all on vaccinations and the most recent recommendations for the MS community. And that, of course, can be found through the MS Society website. All right, moving on. Our next question comes to us from Newmarket, and this has to do with foods. Tiffany, what foods contain VD? I'm assuming that's vitamin D, other than fish. Any recommendations?
That's a very good question. Actually, there's very little foods that naturally contain vitamin D. So yes, fish, canned salmon with the bones is a great food to be eating because not only would you be getting vitamin D, but you're also going to be getting calcium and a ton of omega-3 fatty acids, which is good for anti-inflammatory. However, outside of that, mushrooms, believe it or not, contain a very small amount. But the only other foods that do would be foods that have been fortified with vitamin D. So, for example, in Canada, 1 cup of cow's milk is fortified with about 90 international units of vitamin D. And there's far less in margarine. So, a teaspoon of margarine might give you 30 or 50. Regardless, it's very sparse in our diet. You can't really get it from food. We naturally make it in our skin from the sun. But here in Canada, or most of Canada, we're just too far north that many months of the year, the UV is not strong enough for us to make it. So we need to be taking a supplement. Everybody needs to be taking a vitamin D supplement. And if you're unsure about exactly how much you should be taking, that's something to talk to your healthcare professional about. The upper limit and typical recommendation for the MS population is 4,000 international units a day.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, our next question is coming to us from Toronto, and this is directed towards Michelle, mental health issues. So this is a tough one. Michelle, I believe the incidence of suicide is roughly twice as high for the MS population than the healthy one. Is that due to the diminished quality of life or the disease? So Michelle, I'm going to hand that over to you, and I don't even know if that stat is accurate.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe the way that I'll answer that really important question, I think, is it would be best for me to speak to what I would say I know with more confidence around the connection between living with MS and suicide. And so I'm not sure about the statistic, but I certainly would echo clarity around knowing a statistic that lets us know that living with chronic health issues, and specifically actually chronic pain, as a particular symptom of a chronic health issue, has links to higher rates of completed suicide. And certainly that has to do with quality of life and day-to-day living and feelings of hopelessness, in terms of people maybe feeling like they have no other options at times. And so I just want to make sure, I want to just make sure I'm answering the question. I'm kind of acknowledging the relationship there, but the specific question there. Could you repeat that for me?
Well, the question was, is it due to the disease itself or due to the quality of life?
Okay. Yeah. So I would say unequivocally that quality of life factors would play a primary role here. And so being able to maintain resiliency and a good relationship with one's mental health sort of in an ongoing way while navigating symptoms would be like a protective factor for suicide risk and the increase there. The other piece that I can speak to with less expertise but have some awareness around is depending in terms of how MS might and whether there's some lesion activity in the brain, which impacts cognition. I have some general awareness that there might be a connection there, more specifically to depression. Depending on what areas of the brain are affected with lesion activity, but I couldn't make the definitive link to suicidality. I don't think it would be fair for me to do that as I'm not entirely confident around that piece. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Michelle. So our next question comes to us from Toronto, and I'm going to throw it open to everyone. It's not exactly on the topic we're talking about today, but this question is, can we be organ donors? We, meaning people with MS, I'm assuming. Is there anybody on the panel who wants to address that one? All right, well, I will jump in because I do know from personal experience in my youth, I was a regular blood donor, and I know that was stopped by blood services. So for organ donation, I don't actually have a definitive answer for that. You know, what I can do is pass that along to the back end MS team and see if someone can look that up for us while we're on here, and maybe someone can come up directly with the answer. I do know that for blood services, the last information I had, this is some months old now, but what MS was being reviewed at that time, but because there is no known cause, that was one of the reasons that blood services struck off, if you will, people with MS as blood donors. So I'm going to leave that one there. So MS team at the back end, if there's anyone there who has time to look that up for us, I would greatly appreciate it. All right, next question we have comes from Montreal. This one is for Michelle. Do you think that people with MS should see a therapist, psychologist specialized in dealing with MS or chronic disease, or is therapy of any form beneficial? Michelle, take it away.
That's a great question, and I appreciate why folks living with MS would want to be able to work with a therapist that at the very least has some knowledge around what that experience might be like in terms of their own training and practice. And so my thoughts around that would actually be, it probably depends on what your own sense of what your difficulties or struggle might be given your own presentation of your MS. And so, for example, one of the areas that I specialize in is anxiety and working specifically also with historical trauma. And I do actually find, without advertising myself as a therapist who works with chronic illness, that I do end up getting a lot of referrals or see clients that present with chronic illness because they're also dealing simultaneously either with historical trauma or actually with presenting anxiety that goes along with the difficulty in living with a chronic illness. And so I think if you would be able to identify some of the other factors in terms of your mental health that need attention and find a therapist that can work well with that, then you don't necessarily need to see someone who has specific training in working with chronic illness.
Great answer, and so important. Alrighty, our next question moves us over to physical activity. So this one is for Margot, coming to us from Toronto. I am 25 years old. Is yoga, meditation, and walking enough for physical activity?
Yeah. So I'm going to refer back again to the Canadian Physical Activity Guidelines for adults living with mild to moderate MS. And so the recommendation there is that at a minimum level for maintaining health, we want to have twice a week, at least 30 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity. And then twice a week, strength training of all the major muscle groups. So that's sort of a minimum for maintaining health and physical function. And so if your yoga, meditation, and walking, those are certainly all very beneficial movements and exercises to be doing. So those will all support your wellness. But what you have to ask yourself is my yoga or my walking getting me to a place where I'm in a moderate intensity aerobic zone? And the way you know that, the easiest way to know that is with the talk test. So that means that you're working hard enough, that you're breathing heavier enough, your heart rate's up, that you can still talk, but you wouldn't be able to sing. So you're a bit more labored when you're talking. You might have to pause for breath. If you're working in that zone, then you're reaching a moderate intensity aerobic zone. And similarly, is your walking or your yoga getting you to a place where you're working at your major muscle groups for strength training? So the muscles have felt like they've worked. They notice they've been doing something that's a bit harder than usual. And so it really depends the intensity that you're doing those activities. And again, not everybody's going to be able to meet those guideline recommendations right away. You might have to work up to it, but that's a good way of knowing if you're meeting that minimum amount of physical activity for your health and function.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Our next question is also from Toronto, and this is back to foods. So, Tiffany, do you have any recommendations on super brain foods that aid with fatigue and cognition? Bracket, understanding diet isn't an overall cure. Are there any foods that provide a positive impact? Tiffany, take it away.
Absolutely. There are many foods that provide a positive impact. I will try not to monologue for too long about this, but so there are actually two issues that you're bringing up there. One would be fatigue and the other is the brain health. So them being slightly different when it comes to nutrition. So I'll first just touch on the brain health. So when we're thinking about brain health, so many components. So the first would be lots of fruits and vegetables. You want lots of antioxidants. The pigment is where the antioxidant is. So try to get different colors. We recommend aiming for an orange and a dark green every day as a minimum if you can. I always keep a thing of spinach in my fridge, and that's something that you can throw into a smoothie. You can put into a soup or a stew. You can have a salad with it. When it starts getting wilty, you can put it in the freezer. Fruits and vegetables, and then healthy fats. So I had mentioned the omega-3 fats before when we were talking about salmon, but you also want to get plant-based fats that are unsaturated, which would be liquid at room temperature. So plenty of nuts and seeds. So I know that a nut and a seed is solid, but if you isolate their oil, it's liquid. Nuts and seeds, avocado, and then olives or olive oil. So even olive oil itself has been studied for its brain benefits. So it contains things like vitamin E and polyphenols. These are types of antioxidants that are good for our health. The fats, the other thing is the carbohydrates. So we don't want to eat too many refined carbohydrates. And this is where it spills into the fatigue piece. If you're eating carbohydrates that are processed and therefore digested quickly, what happens is that you get a spike in your blood sugar, which can lead to a spike, which then leads to a spike in your insulin, and then you can end up with a low afterwards. So you might get a spike of energy, but then you end up with a low, and this can exacerbate your fatigue. So you want to eat foods in a way that's going to maintain a more consistent blood sugar level. And the way you do that is by eating those grains the way they look like in nature. So thinking about steel cut oats or wheat in its unprocessed form. So something like a spelt or a kamut or a farro, check them out in the bulk section or the natural food section of your grocery store. carbohydrates in beans and lentils, but also eating those grains or carbohydrates along with protein and fat so that you're eating a balanced snack or a complete meal. You're getting a little, so a good simple way to remember it is visualize your plate. There is a picture behind me over here. It's a little bit far away, but half of your plate you want as vegetables and fruit. A quarter would be your protein, and then a quarter is the starch or that whole grain.
Excellent information. Thank you. And that's definitely an area I know I need to work on. So thank you. That's a great way to think about it. Okay, we're going to go back now to that question we had about organ donation. Thank you to the behind the scenes team. We have an answer. So according to the Canadian Transplant Society, everyone can be a donor, regardless of age, medical condition, or sexual orientation. A donor's eligibility is determined by the healthcare team upon your death. For additional information, please call your provincial health authority. But according to the Canadian Transplant Society, there's your answer. Yes, you can sign up as an organ donor. I know I have. And then upon your death, it seems that the medical team then will determine what organs could potentially be used. But great question. Not exactly on topic today, but again, thank you to the team behind the scenes for getting us an answer. All right, moving along, I am going to go back to our panel now, and I would like to get your thoughts all individually on, we're talking about wellness overall. So for each of you, oh, no, we don't need my question. We've got someone else, a real person. This one's coming from Sherwood Park. I have had a first demyelinating episode, a CIS. I'm just in the beginning of this journey. Thank you for being here. Being a very action-oriented person, for advice on what I can do during this wait-and-see period. So here we have, it sounds like a newly diagnosed person, and they are looking for information about what they can do during this wait-and-see period. So I'm going to say good for you for being here and looking for answers and trying to find the best path forward. Let's start again with Margot. When you, in your experience, physical activity with newly diagnosed people, what is your best advice for people who are newly diagnosed?
Yeah, I think a big part of it again is just, listening to your body and doing things that support your overall wellness. So if you have the energy and you're feeling good, it's always helpful to move your body. And then also being able to listen to your body when it's asking you to rest. And it's really developing that body awareness and that compassion for your body to be able to listen to what it's telling you. So keep moving if you can, because it's so important to have movement in our day, but also listen to your body when it's telling you that you need to conserve your energy.
Great advice. Moving along to Tiffany.
So I would sort of repeat what I said before, not to put too much pressure on yourself, because there is a lot going on. There's a lot that you have to process in your head. Your expectations of life have changed. And so when it comes to nutrition, do the best you can. If it's something that you think you would like to work on, pick 1 or 2 goals and go from there. I know that there is a lot of information out there or things that you could do. It depends where you're at with things, whether or not you want to go down a road of exploring, overhauling your diet. I always encourage people start with a couple goals that are long-term, something that you can sustain for the rest of your life. The other thing you could do is you could check out, you're in Alberta, so Alberta Health Services has virtual programs. You could see what virtual programs are accessible to you if you did want to learn more information.
Excellent. Great idea, especially now. And Michelle, newly diagnosed. I know this is a topic that you and I have been on various presenting panels on before, and it's a big topic, but what is your advice for the newly diagnosed?
Sure. So a couple of things that I might highlight just in those very early stages of a new diagnosis is certainly the recognition and acknowledgement that some of the emotional or psychological impact is probably going to feel a bit like a roller coaster. And so there may be days in which you are feeling quite well equipped to manage and resourced. And then there might be other days where there's a recognition or a new awareness of perhaps a loss or a transition in your life that feels more immediate. And that's particularly as the kind of shock of this new information sinks in. And I kind of liken it almost to digestion when we get new information. And that's even when we're anticipating that something was already wrong. The initial sort of psychological reaction is to feel a certain level of shock before that information sinks in. And so, as echoed here, to kind of go easy on yourself and really connect with your own capacity for self-compassion. And certainly I know just by your question and by being here in particular, you're in psychology, what we would call a monitor, which is someone who copes by seeking out more information, which is one great coping strategy for when we might have a sense of loss of control. And so I'd encourage you to sort of be aware of that and to listen to what you need to find out as you move through your own relationship with this new diagnosis.
Excellent. Thank you so much, all of you. All right, our next question goes back to physical activity. It comes to us from North Vancouver. Margot, I'm having trouble balancing the need to exercise and stay cool, especially in the summer as overheating causes symptoms for me. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, so that's such an important piece of understanding exercising safely, because often people living with MS will be more sensitive to heat, and your symptoms might get worse when your body temperature rises. So in the summer in particular, I do just generally recommend that you don't exercise during the hottest part of the day if you know that heat will make your symptoms worse. So I would suggest when you're planning your day to try to work out either in the morning or in the evening, especially if you're exercising outside and not in an air-conditioned environment. But then along with that, drink lots of water when you are before and after exercising, and just be aware of your body in the heat. So if you notice any symptoms that are increasing or ones that you didn't have before you started exercising, slow down or stop until you're cooler. And in the summer in particular, if you're someone who enjoys swimming or water aerobics, that's a good way to not overheat necessarily, even though it might be warm. And also, if you're lucky enough to be near nature and you can do some movement in the forest where it's cooler, that's another good way to do it as well.
Great ideas, great strategies there. Thank you very much, Margot. All right, our next question comes to us from Toronto, and it is for Tiffany. Wondering if it's better to eat oil raw, i.e. salad dressings, or if it's okay to heat oil when cooking foods. I've read that it's bad to heat your oil and wondering if that is true.
I have received this question a lot over the years. And first, I'm going to say, if you dig deep enough, you will find something bad about any food. I mean, apples, for example, if they have a component in them, if you eat enough of it, it's carcinogenic. So, but we're not going to stop eating apples. With oil, there is some truth to that depending on the type of oil. Some oils are more heat stable than others. So, for example, canola oil or avocado oil are more heat stable than olive oil. So those are more common cooking oils that we have. But even with olive oil, it can still handle up to a medium heat on your cooktop. I wouldn't leave it alone in the pan very long. Once you get food in there, that'll help to stabilize it. And then if you're cooking olive oil in the oven, it's fine up to about a 375 degree oven. So that's okay. We can accomplish most things within that heating area. If it is getting too hot, though, that can denature the fat. It can change the way it is and change the health properties. So if you can keep olive oil within there, canola oil is a bit stronger. The other thing I'm going to mention is oils or any foods that have a high oil content, a high unsaturated oil, those foods I was recommending earlier, they can go rancid. So you do want to ensure that you're keeping these foods properly. So for example, I'm going to use ground flax seed. So once a flax seed is ground up, the oil is exposed and it can go rancid quite quickly because it's a very unsaturated fat in there. So the way you can mitigate that is keep it in your freezer. Your freezer is a dark place. Keep it in an airtight container in your freezer. And then maybe you keep a week or two worth in your fridge for easy access. And then you have sort of your backup in the freezer. So the same would be true for nuts or seeds. For cooking oils, keep it in a dark jar and then make sure the lid is on good in your cupboard closed away versus on your counter or even in some of those fancy oil pottery things that people decant their oil into. Those aren't airtight. So I wouldn't, if you have a small one, that's okay. And you're going through it, in a short period of time. But if you have a larger quantity, make sure it's in an airtight container and it's dark.
Wonderful. Great tips there. Thank you so much. All right, our next question is for the whole panel. And again, it's from someone who's newly diagnosed. So I am also a newly diagnosed person. Currently, I'm fearful of what effects the DMT will have. That's a disease-modifying therapy. Can the panel recommend coping techniques to shield the fear and what-ifs of potential adverse side effects? Let's start across the country with Margot. Is that something that you've found in your work on physical activity, Margot?
Yeah, I imagine Michelle will have a more thorough answer for this than I do, but just generally speaking, I know it's easier said than done, but trying to focus on the present moment and what your body's capable of doing from a movement and strength perspective, I find that that's always helpful. But again, it takes lots of practice to get to a place where you can focus more on the present and not worry about the future. So I'll let someone else tackle that who might have more, tangible advice.
Thank you very much. Tiffany, is this something you've come across at all, or any advice you'd have from a nutritional point of view?
Yeah, I will throw my 2 cents in there and I'll sort of add on to what Margot said. So there are things out of your control. There are many aspects within your control, and nutrition is one of them. So if some people find it helpful to focus on things that you can control, and then you at the end of the day, you can say, I am able to do these things, or I am doing things that I am able to control. And again, just setting those small realistic goals, say if it is around your nutrition that you might work on, and then you can put your focus and energy more towards that, because that is something that you have the ability to manage.
Excellent advice. And Michelle, we'll end with you for this question. Again, newly diagnosed, fearful about side effects, potential adverse reactions to DMT.
Sure. And that question makes a lot of sense, of course, psychologically, because when we're taking a new medication, we are moving towards putting into our body something that's unknown, and we're not sure what the impact is going to be. And it can be quite fear-inducing, understandably, to be given kind of a list of possible side effects. So I have a few concrete thoughts around some good, potentially helpful coping strategies for this. And it really has to do with discerning between what we might call really sort of healthy, present awareness, and then what we might call hypervigilance of our nervous system, which is when, and I kind of liken this to like a smoke detector. We all need a smoke detector in our home in case we have a fire, and to monitor what might be happening in our home if there's smoke, but whose fire alarm hasn't gone off when they've burnt toast. And so one of the things that I'll say is that have some awareness around what the potential side effects are, so that you can do perhaps a regular check-in with yourself each day, and pay attention to what your body's doing. and try to stay aware versus hypervigilant about it. And that sort of forward thinking or that what if thinking that we might do. And then on the other end of that, if you notice that your mind is sort of traveling to what if kinds of places, the best thing that we can do psychologically, and I even recommend that clients put this on a post-it note somewhere where they might do a lot of what if thinking, is just remind yourself that you actually do have options. You can always stop the DMT if it's not working for you. You can try a different medication. There's always some way in which you have agency. And so a message, something like, I can handle whatever comes my way, and being able to remind yourself that you have that capacity is also really helpful.
Excellent tips. Thank you all very much. So our next question goes back to you, Michelle. It's another one on mental health. It comes to us from Quebec. Michelle, does having a chronic illness like MS put you at more risk of addiction?
That's a great question. I'm going to answer this more broadly rather than from a more statistical perspective, but the link that I would make between living with chronic illness and the potential for an increased risk of addiction would certainly be when someone might use or have a sort of dependency or reliance on a substance for coping. Either with the psychological impact of living with chronic illness or with some of the symptoms that MS brings. And so that risk in terms of the connection there makes sense. Of course, because living with a chronic illness, of course, does increase other mental health challenges like depression and anxiety. And we know that those can be tied to addiction as well. So that would be the link that I would make between those two.
Good perspective. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, our next question comes from Alberton, and this one is directed for physical activity. So Margot, this one's over to you. Are there specific exercises that can improve foot drop?
Yeah, so in short, yes, there are, but it also would require a bit of an actual hands-on functional evaluation to see really what the cause of your foot drop is, and to give specific recommendations around when to wear a brace or AFO versus not. So I can't answer that definitively, like by giving examples right now online, but I would say consult with a physiotherapist who has more of a specialty in neurological conditions, because foot drop is common to many neurological conditions, and they'd be able to guide you on that. But often, yes, there are exercises that can help.
Wonderful. Good advice. Thank you so much. I know here in BC, I have a couple of neighbors who have been consulting virtually with their physiotherapists when they couldn't physically get there in person, and they found it very, very helpful. So I think depending on what practice you can find, it still is possible in our virtual world. Alrighty, our next question comes to us from Brantford, Ontario. I was diagnosed with remitting relapsing MS in July of this past summer. So another newly diagnosed person, thank you for being here. I'm 28 weeks pregnant. I've been taking vitamin D and have been trying to make sure I am getting lots of fruits and veggies in my diet. Anything else with pregnancy specifically that you can suggest? So Tiffany, this one is over to you.
So you're lucky, because this is another component of my job. In addition to supporting neuro, I do pregnancy nutrition classes. So congratulations on your pregnancy, and good for you for focusing on, eating more fruits and vegetables. That it can be difficult to make these changes. So I'll reiterate what I said before. If you can eat I spoke about nuts and seeds and other healthy fats. You want to focus on that. But in pregnancy specifically, you want to make sure that you're getting those omega-3 fats. So really for all of us, but people living with MS, you want enough omega-3 fats. And you also in pregnancy want to make sure you're getting enough of them from fish. So the thing is, you want to also stick with low mercury fish. So salmon is a great option because it is available to us in Canada. And you can get it in a can, so it can be readily available. Fish that are small have little or no mercury in them. So things like sardines, herring, what's the other one? Anchovies. These little fish are very high in omega-3 and iron, and they also contain no mercury. So those are good options. The other thing too is to make sure that you're eating enough protein and following food safety recommendations. So there is really good information out there. Actually, Health Canada has healthy eating and pregnancy. If you Google that, there's also another website, Healthy Parents, Healthy Children. I think it's .ca. That's another good resource if you wanted to do more reading on it.
Wonderful advice. Thank you so much, Tiffany. All right, we're coming to the close of today's session. So to wrap things up, I'm going to open it up to the whole panel, and I'm going to ask you all, if you wanted someone to remember one thing about living well with MS from today, what would that one thing be? Margot, let's start with you.
Well, this is a hard one because there's so many more things I could say, but I think overall I would recommend really leaning into the things that in life that make you feel good and that influence your overall wellness. So to me, this is really learning about your habits when it comes to all of the different healthy lifestyle components. So sleep, eating, stress reduction, physical activity, and finding things within those elements that we can control and really making time for the parts of it that make us feel good, because those will all impact your overall wellness and your quality of life. And even just small habit changes one at a time can just have a major impact on how well we feel.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Tiffany, your closing thoughts for us today.
Yeah. So sort of to add on to that too, do not overhaul your diet. Think long term. This is the body that you have for the rest of your life. So if you do want to work on an area of your nutrition, pick one or two things. Also respecting who you are. What is your background? What is your current knowledge base? What is your fatigue level? All those things factor into our food choices. It's not just about what we read or what we hear we should be doing. It's about our lifestyle. And so honor that and take into consideration all of those variables. But you want to be able to make sustainable changes that you feel good about. Something that you can reflect back on and say, I did that. So, for example, one thing us dietitians always like to promote is fiber. So fiber is essential for bowel health. It's also what feeds the gut microbiome, which is the healthy bacteria living in your gut. And we know they have a good role in our immune system. So you could set a goal around how are you going to increase fiber? What is that going to look like? So maybe you're going to try to do a meatless Monday, or you're going to try to eat one extra vegetable a day, or you're going to try to integrate a grain the way it looks like in nature 3 days of the week. So it's a very specific goal and something that is helping you meet that overall goal of increasing your fiber intake, but it's something you can go back and assess whether or not you were able to accomplish it. And if you weren't, that's okay. You could learn from that, how it went and what could you do to make it more doable in the future. And maybe it's modifying the goal, or maybe it's learning some new tools to be able to do it.
Excellent advice. Thank you. Michelle, your closing thoughts for us today.
Sure. My one thing has 4 little components because it is hard to come up with one thing. But it is one acronym, I suppose, and it's just what I might call the 4 C's. which are something that we can think about when living with MS. So the first C is thinking about MS as your companion. And I know that might sound like a strange word, but this is certainly wrapped up in how we sort out what it's like to live with MS in terms of our identity, and this idea of MS living alongside us for the journey as a companion. And so what does that mean? The next C is about checking in. And so if most of us lead, busy lives where maybe we've paid less attention to how we're doing. And so I do suggest living well is about checking in daily, just to do what I call like a temperature check around how you might be doing, to pay attention to what you need. The third C is about community. And living well also has to do with intentionally choosing a community that is supportive and understanding. And that might involve making some changes in friendships, or reaching out to a specific support group. And the last C would have to do with communication, and really just being mindful and aware of how you let people know how you're feeling so that they can support you in the ways that you need.
Excellent. I want to thank our panel from across Canada. Superb expertise and excellent advice today. So thank you all so much for your time. That is all the time we have for today. We really appreciate everything that you've passed along today. Great tips. And all of you out there in virtual land, thank you for all your fabulous questions to make today's session so successful. All right, I need to also thank our sponsors. Our lead sponsor today was Bristol Myers Squibb. Contributing sponsors, Biogen Canada, Novartis Pharmaceuticals Canada, Roche Canada for providing the financial support to make this online conference possible. We couldn't do it without all of them. So on behalf of the MS Society of Canada, I'd like to thank you for attending and supporting MS Connect 2021 Spring Edition. We hope that you've connected with research, information, and resources that you need for your MS journey or the MS journey of someone you love and care about. There's also support available for anyone experiencing MS-related challenges through the MS Society's Knowledge Network. These are our MS navigators. They're there at the other end of the phone or chat or email to help. As well, we have one-on-one peer support and one-call programs. All the information about these support programs can be found at the MS Society's website, which is mssociety.ca. You can also help us celebrate MS Awareness Month by taking part in the second annual virtual carnation pinning on May the 5th. You can hashtag Take Action for MS and show your support for the MS community by sharing on social media all through the month of May. Also, of course, in May, I hope you'll join me and my team as we all walk safely in our own communities. MS Walk Day is Sunday, May 30th. It happens to be taking place on World MS Day this year, so we're hoping to have an extra special celebration. Tens of thousands of people will be walking in their neighborhoods right across Canada and will be connecting online. We're hoping to show that no one with MS is alone and the community is there to support you. The website where you can find out more about walks this year is mswalks.ca. Now, in the coming days following this MS Connect conference, you will receive a link to complete a survey. We'd ask that you please take the time to do this, as your input is important to staff and volunteers to understand how we can improve the conference for next time. And next time again will be coming up this fall. It's taking place in November. For those of you that want to mark your calendar already, it will be a 5-day event, November 22nd to 26th. Stay tuned for more details, and we look forward to seeing you at that event. Again, on behalf of the entire MS community, thank you for everybody's participation to make today's session and today's entire conference so successful. Take care.